Okay. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, February 6, 2024. I'm Ryan Cook, Chair of the Easton Zoning Board of Appeals. We don't have any items before us tonight, but what we do have is our Director of Planning and Economic Development, Stephanie Danielson, will be doing a presentation on the MBTA Communities Plan. So for those of you who are unaware, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in trying to increase housing availability and affordability, has asked towns that are MBTA communities and MBTA adjacent communities, is that the right language, adjacent, to make some zoning adoptions to allow more multifamily or higher density use, and it's 15 units per acre, is that correct?
It is on, and I'm plugged in.
We're having some technical challenges.
No, you don't need to do something on the box?
Share.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I've made some notes. 15 units per acre.
15 units per acre. And it requires a little bit different for adjacent communities.
Yep, and I'll explain all of that.
So if you're ready, Ms. Danielson, you can.
Is Joe? We're doing a presentation, and I'm plugged in.
Share, another share. Oh, join. Let's share content. Start meeting. Share.
There we go, there's us. That's what matters.
This was just HDMI.
Right, but you need the directions for the HDMI too.
Share content. All I did was share.
It's a bit of technology they got there.
Just says share.
Takes the fun out
I have
of the
them.
meeting.
Okay, bring them over, please. Sorry about this.
That's right.
Joe didn't have this.
Also,
Do you need to share your display?
the rest of
Yeah.
my
It's just share.
technology
You're plugged in. This is
Doesn't.
plugged in. Oh, and it's plugged in?
Anyone in the room under
It's
30?
all plugged in.
You don't want to stop.
Okay, so to the display, connect the percentages, we've done that. The hybrid box will display the message asking if you want to share.
Which I did.
You're going
And I
to-
did share. Wait. We're not putting in the meeting idea.
So I'm on the Massachusetts Association of Realtors Government Affairs
Last time it
Committee, and
worked.
this was a topic at last month's
It's
meeting as well.
If we go back.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there are a number of towns that are
Want me to grab it?
fighting against it.
Joe, can you help us?
Yes, there's a
Right now I know Milton
Yeah.
yes.
is one.
I
It's
just put
supposed to be
share.
Their
Share
vote
is
on
it-
that is today.
Randolph is another one?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if it's Randolph or Holbrook or
No.
one of the towns over there. But there are a number of towns.
Ryan, do you
My,
want to do your minutes while we figure this out?
Yeah, no, we'll just move on and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Should look different.
Okay, we can still do approval of minutes, and we can do approval of the change of the meeting schedule for 2024 to accommodate the presidential primary election. So first things first, we're going to do approval of the meeting minutes for January 16th. Everybody had an opportunity to read through them?
Yes.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Mr. Curran makes a move to approve. Seconded. Mr. McCall seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? We'll do a hand vote.
Aye.
That's all five. And then as alternate, it's a nice try.
Whether I'm voting or not.
So it
I
was
approve.
5-0
And
on the
it's-
approval of the meeting minutes. Okay.
It just,
We originally had scheduled March 5th, Tuesday, March 5th, for our March zoning board meeting. And wouldn't you know, it's a presidential primary election, Super Tuesday. So we need to vote
What did you-
to move that meeting to the 19th of March.
So moved.
So moved, Ms. McCall.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hanberger is a second. Any discussion? No one wants to fight for a different day? Okay. So 19th of March, all those in favor, hand vote. So that is 5-0 as well.
So you have
So both
something
of
on
those
the
are 5-0. Look at that, we're on the, show up on the screen twice. Fantastic. You look twice as good now. Were you able to capture that, Suzanne? Both of those are 5-0? Okay, fantastic.
Table here.
I thought there was something you needed to do upstairs to share my, this.
So you're saying Milton's vote is this evening? Or is
Vote's
it
today.
a vote at the polls?
Yes.
Oh, that's,
Yeah, my brother and sister both
there it is.
live in town.
Yeah, so that's a,
Oh,
that's a
good.
funky
I
one
can't
because
see
they
it,
got,
though.
you were explaining that, right?
Yeah,
So,
because they do have trolley tracks
gotcha.
in the town. So
Okay.
it's a real, I mean, I don't know what if, it'll be interesting to see how, if they do vote no, what happens next.
Right, right. All right, Ms. Dana, you all
Okay.
set? All right, so Ms.
All right.
Danielson, take it away.
All right, well, thank you for the lead-in. So I'm here tonight, as Ryan mentioned, to talk about the MBTA multifamilies by right zoning requirement. So what I'll do is I'm going to talk about what the law is, what it means to Easton, why complying is required, and then what the town has taken, what steps the town has taken towards coming into compliance. So what the zoning is, it is a requirement that MBTA communities and MBTA adjacent communities adopt a zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right. A lot of communities either have multifamily zoning allowances that are so restrictive that it really inhibits development of multifamily housing, or it doesn't allow it at all. So this is an initiative to make sure that communities have a zoning district that allows the multifamily by right. It was part of the 2021 Economic Development Bill, and the reason it was part of the bill is in response to the housing crisis that exists in Massachusetts today. There are not enough housing units for the people that live here or people coming into the state, and the housing can be very expensive for people at the moderate income level, lower income, and even some people kind of on the higher income level. There's just not enough housing. And the thought was that you generate more housing, even in the form of multifamily, and that will help, one, make more housing available to people, but also help drive down the cost of housing. The requirement is that your zoning district be at least 50 acres in total. You can have sub-districts that comprise that total district. 25 acres have to be contiguous, and then your other districts can be 5 acres or more. And
Can we ask questions while we go along?
you can, but I reserve the right that if it's bogging down, I'm coming up to something.
No, that's
I'll-
fine.
yeah.
On the 25 contiguous acres, can it be acreage that's already developed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. And I'll explain that. You'll see my big circle on the right-hand side and what it means and what it doesn't mean. And the zoning has to allow a minimum of 15 units per acre. There is a maximum, a minimum requirement for the district as a whole. It has to be able to accommodate 10% of the town's total permanent housing stock. In Easton, that's 9,126 units. So our district, Easton's district, needs to allow up to 913 units in total across the whole district. Again, the intent of the requirement is to reduce local zoning barriers to multifamily housing. And what's really important to note is this is a zoning mandate. It means the town needs to adopt zoning that could allow for this development to happen. It is not a building mandate. The state doesn't expect the towns to build this out or require that it be built out. And this goes to Ryan's question about what your district needs to look like. The district does not have to be all vacant land that could be developed. It can include other land that might at some point in the future be redevelopable. Maybe it won't be. So I just talked about the requirements. We are an adjacent community, so to back up a little bit, an MBTA community is a town or city in the state that either has an MBTA transit station within its boundaries or is adjacent to another community that has an MBTA transit station. So Easton doesn't have any transit stations, but we abut Stoughton, Brockton, and Mansfield, and they all have transit stations. They all have commuter rail stations. And Brockton actually has a bus terminal. So as an adjacent community, the total acreage is the same, but if you're an MBTA transit community, your 50 acres has to be all within a half mile of the transit station. We don't have one, so we don't have to do that. What we do want to do, and the state is encouraging, is to locate your district in an area that is close to services, maybe walkable neighborhoods, places where people might be able to avail themselves of the local businesses, eateries, there may be work opportunities, and also maybe within proximity to either a transit station outside of town or an arterial corridor, a transportation corridor. And as an adjacent community, Easton needs to adopt the zoning by the end of this year. So that's 12/31/24. The plan of the Planning and Zoning Board is to present the zoning to town meeting in May with the hope that it passes. And they're looking for people's support to pass the zoning. And if it doesn't, then we'll go to fall town meeting. So why comply with the law? It's required. It's a mandate, and basically the Attorney General has said that there is no option to waive out or opt out of the zoning, and if a community doesn't comply, they could lose access to important funding that funds projects like infrastructure improvement, construction projects, planning projects that help communities plan for how they might grow into the future, your master plans and climate plans, those type of things. And Easton has benefited from these programs significantly over the past 13 years. And this is just a list of some of the funding that the town has received. And funding that's helped support revitalization in the town's economic growth areas. It also, the zoning supports a lot of the goals of the town's planning documents that they've worked on over the years to identify the areas where the town should invest for growth and development, and providing housing options for people at all income levels, all ages. So it's really important. One of the things that we heard during the master planning process, I know it was part of the age-friendly communities plan that was developed, we hear it with the housing production plan, is to have housing that's available to people at all ages and various stages of their life. So young people who may have grown up in the town, moved away for school, want to move back, they want to be close to their families and raise their kids here. You know, having housing that allows them to start back in the community, their adult lives. People who are living, have kids in the school system, and also people who want to age in place. There are a lot of people in town who are getting older, and they want to be able to stay in the community. They want to stay here. They have family, they have friends, and it's becoming more and more difficult from an economic standpoint. So, when this requirement first came down and towns were told they needed to comply with it, and at that time the Department of Housing and Community Development published the draft guidelines. They required that the governing boards of the municipalities hold a briefing session. That was so that the boards would be informed and understanding of what the requirement was, what it meant, how they needed to comply with it, and also give the towns an opportunity to respond to the guidelines and provide comments. At that time, the select board, at their briefing meeting, they decided to appoint an implementation review committee. And it was comprised of representatives of the various boards within the town, like the planning board. I don't know that we had a Board of Appeals representative, but the school committee, the Conservation Commission, the select board, and then staff members. And the group was charged with meeting, reviewing the guidelines, drafting comments to provide back to the Department of Housing and Economic Development, and also to identify potential areas within the town that it made sense for this type of district to be established. That committee met over a couple of months, came back, provided their comments for the select board to submit to the state, and also had developed guiding principles for developing the district and the zoning. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but primarily what their goals and guiding principles were that the districts be located in areas where the town already had identified the desire for growth and new development and revitalization. You can see from this list, I'm not going to go through all of it, but the planning board has been meeting and has had several discussions about the zoning. I'll come back to this. This is just a matrix that identifies the 3 areas that are being discussed. Right now, this acreage shows the total number in that district, but the planning board is looking into reducing the districts, the sub-districts, and then what the criteria was for deciding that these made the most sense. So the first district I'm going to show you is, we refer to it as Foundry Eastman, and you will see, I think most people will recognize, especially when I point it out. This is Robert Drive, where it intersects with Foundry Street and where Foundry Street turns into Eastman Street. This is the Avalon development. We have Target and the shopping plaza. This was a manufacturing facility. We think it's a lighter kind of industrial use right now. A couple of vacant lots and smaller lots. Again, this was selected because we already have housing here, and it already meets with the new Avalon units that were approved by the Board of Appeals a couple of years ago. This meets the 15 units per acre requirement. And people will always ask, well, does that count? Well, this area counts towards the district. It demonstrates that it can accommodate the 15 units per acre. And again, this is fairly recent, and the reason Avalon develops these projects is because that's their business, is providing housing They have an affordability component, and they're in it for the long haul. So it's very unlikely that that will be redeveloped. But it also is in easy access to shopping facilities. Again, opportunities for people to work, it's retail. But again, opportunities, and there's eateries. We have a new Starbucks that is recently developed just south of the Avalon project. And we believe that the reason they came to Easton is because, one, it's a busy corridor. People can get off fairly easily, but also you have a lot of opportunity for people right there. It's a market, kind of a captive market. The board is considering, there's been a lot of feedback at the sessions that they've had from the residents along Furnace Village, along Foundry Street, the Furnace Village area. And they're very concerned about traffic. So they're concerned that if this were to completely redevelop, this whole area could accommodate about 1,000 units if it were redeveloped. So the board is considering removing the Target and the Hannaford Plaza and possibly the warehouse. Any questions on that district? Comments?
So it includes already developed parcels.
Yes.
So it's conceivable that the 950 units could already be existing within town?
Yes. Yes. They don't. The districts that they're looking at don't have 950 units. And again, I just want to remind everyone, it's not a mandate to build. It's just zoning that would allow a developer.
A new zoning district and reclassifying them.
Yes. And we're not reclassifying the underlying district. So the state allowed you to approach this two ways. And I think there are some towns that in their districts, they might have a couple of districts, because in one district, they might say, you know what, we want to change the underlying district, and we're going to make it all multifamily by right. Or you can do it as an overlay district. And I think you're probably familiar. An overlay district kind of sits on top of your underlying zoning. And it's available if a developer wants to take advantage of it. But it doesn't replace the underlying zoning. And the board, with feedback from the implementation team and also from public comment, felt it was important to keep the ability for those retail and commercial uses, because the town doesn't have a lot of commercial areas. So does that?
Can it be apartments or condominium ownership within
Either.
that?
Either. Yep. Yep. In fact, what I've heard, and we're hearing from people who are aging out and have homes that they could sell, they would love to be able to purchase a condominium. It's maintenance-free living, and it really works. It's ownership, kind of a set. You know what your costs are. So that would be desirable. So if someone wanted to develop the condominiums instead of apartments, that would be fine.
Why would taking out the place where Target is, for example, be something that would be favorable to some or disfavorable? What's the significance of that?
There are two reasons. One, while we, staff and members of the planning board, feel, again, because these commercial areas really seem to be doing well, especially now with Avalon there. I've been by, the Target, you'd see people shopping throughout the day, but I see the parking lot more full now when I go over in that area during the middle of the day. So we feel that it's highly unlikely that those would be redeveloped anytime soon.
Those would be what?
Redeveloped anytime soon. They could under the zoning, because we have a density incentive if in the zoning. So one of the things the state I'm going to talk about two things. So I'm going to take a step back, but I'm answering your question. In the initial guidelines, you could not require an affordability component, and you also couldn't require mixed use. In the revised guidelines, the state, and the reason for both of those was they didn't want to make it economically unfeasible for a developer to be able to build. When they reissued the guidelines, they said, okay, you can have a 10% max affordability component, which the town wants, because that allows you to keep up with your subsidized housing inventory, right? Plus, it provides more affordable housing, which is something that's really needed, not only in the state, but also in Easton. They also said you can do commercial, but it has to be economically viable, and the way to do that is to allow a density bonus. So to answer your question, someone could, the way we're proposing the zoning be written, Target or the shopping plaza could build up with multifamily on additional floors, up to 4 floors in total. So that's what they were concerned about. They were concerned that if that happened, that
Target or the shopping plaza would do that.
yes, and then there would be a substantial increase in traffic.
Got it.
Oh.
So. Okay, we're ready for the next one? And I can always come back. I'm happy to answer questions as we go. So this area is the corner, the southeast corner of Belmont and Washington Street. And I like to point out the Marketplace building here. This is the kind of interestingly shaped building. And you have Belmont Arms over here. Belmont Arms has 2 apartment buildings already with a lot of extra space. One of the other things we looked for in identifying the districts was access to sewer. Right. The whole town isn't sewered, but again, the Foundry Eastman, that site, that district would have access to, the whole district would have access to sewer. Here, the sewer runs up to the dentist's office right here, but could be extended down if some of these areas were to be redeveloped. We also have a landowner who was at one of our earlier meetings who purchased property here and is very interested in redeveloping that with multifamily housing. It's in close proximity to businesses, even more work opportunities. You have the industrial park over here, close to Brockton and close to Route 24. So this seemed like a good location for one of the sub-districts. The board, originally, this is IBC. It is a HVAC ductwork manufacturer, and we didn't have that in as a proposed parcel. The board's likely going to take that out.
What's the size of this parcel?
This one, I have to go back to the map, so hold on a second. So that one's 28 acres with IBC. And the Eastman Foundry is 68 acres. I think what it will be, if removing those 2 and possibly 3 parcels, will cut it about in half. All right, any questions on that one?
But if we didn't, if they're not removed, then that's all set, the greater than or equal to 50 acres is satisfied
With that one district. And that was another point that the folks from Furnace Village made. And I also think from a philosophical and strategy standpoint, it makes sense to have more than one district and in different parts of town, and in different parts of town that, again, are either are close to transportation corridors, like 95, 495, 24, 138, which the third one you'll see is, or within the furthest distance from an MBTA station is 4 miles, which would be boundary to the Mansfield train station. So that's still a reasonable distance for someone to get to a transit station if they wanted to commute. And then the third one is up by Roach Brothers, and you have the Roach Brothers Plaza. Again, you have some businesses, you have some retail opportunity here. There are medical centers or medical office buildings. And then we had some multifamily housing over here. These are condominium units. And that was one of the other things we looked for. Where was there already existing multifamily housing? And housing that probably wasn't likely to be rebuilt, but continued to provide housing options for people. Another attraction for this area is this is the MBTA right-of-way, and if the South Coast Rail ever did move forward, which we're kind of skeptical that that would ever happen with the investment that the state just made in the Middleborough spur to Taunton. But if it were, the town would then need an area that was within the transit station location, the half-mile requirement.
And those requirements for acreage, is it upland acres or just any acres?
So it has to accommodate the 15 units per acre. So it can include wetlands, but what happens is there's a complicated calculation that the state does, and I go like this because it's a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and it has several worksheets within it that you enter information. So we had to provide GIS data for each of the parcels. Is everyone familiar with, I keep saying this, and it was a young person yesterday who's like, what's GIS? Does everyone understand what GIS data is? Okay, it's information about the geography of the land.
Yes.
Yeah, geographical information system. So that identifies, so we have data layers that identify where the wetlands are likely to be, the other information about restricted lands. So this calculation would take that information and then extract that out to determine how many units per acre the district could provide for. So each of these districts in their current configuration meet that requirement. When we added in the IBC, we were able to figure out how to add in the wetland area and the acreage. So we're pretty comfortable that when we reran the model, it showed that it could still support the 15 units per acre. And we also, the original Eastman Foundry included parcels on the south side of Foundry Street, and the board really wanted to pull those out. And so we had pulled those out, and again, we kind of reran the model, and we're pretty comfortable. We had some of the state's technical assistance experts take a look at it. Any other questions? All right. So at this point, Peter and I'm sorry, I should have let you know before I even started that Peter Deshane, the chair of the planning board, intended to be here tonight, but he had car problems. Where one of the cars was in the shop and the other family cars were out doing other activities, so he wasn't able to be here. But he and I have been doing presentations to most of the municipal boards in town. By the time we're done, we'll have done over 21 meetings so that we can help people understand what the zoning is, what it isn't, what it means, get feedback, take that into consideration, and then move forward. The next important meetings that are coming up. Next Monday, they're going to review and finalize the proposed districts. So they've had conversations about how they might reduce those, and they'll review that with the full board and make a decision on the final districts. Then on the 27th at Frothingham Hall, they will receive final public comment on the district and the zoning. On March 12th, they will then close the hearing, deliberate, and vote on the district, and vote to advance it to town meeting. Now, I don't have a date for this yet, but we are planning after that to have at least one other public session, probably in the form of an open house, so that we can invite members of the public who may not have heard yet about the zoning or still has questions, and have them, give them an opportunity to come and learn more and get answers to any questions they might have.
So on all those, you came up, we're well over 100 acres in what was proposed there. Obviously, some of that's going to be pulled back.
Yes.
Is there an advantage to having more than the 50 acres?
Not substantially. I mean,
As long as we
Yeah,
have 25 contiguous.
So that question has several different answers. I mean, there are some communities that are actually, they are going beyond that. I think it was Lexington and some other communities where they were already thinking and talking about multifamily housing and where it should go. So they had some good ideas, and they have several sub-districts that comprise their district, and I think it probably is over 50 acres in total. So if that's what you were looking for as a community, it's a mandate, but it also was an opportunity for communities to think about, well, where do we think this makes sense for us? Aside from the folks that have the MBTA stations, right? To have a lot more, there's not a real advantage to Easton today. We want to have more than the 50 acres because when the last step in this process after town meeting votes, it gets approved, then you have to send your full package of information to the state with the zoning, and they run it through the compliance model again, and they make sure that it meets all the requirements. We've actually submitted the full parcels. We submitted those to the state in November because they would do a pre-adoption review. And we wanted to make sure that we understood what we were doing and that whatever was passed at town meeting would get adopted. They haven't responded back to us yet. But that's, for Easton, that's a reason to have a few more acres just to make sure that it complies.
Now, there are some towns who are at this point choosing to not comply. Has that even been a consideration from the town?
No, the select board from the beginning said, you know what, it's me. I will tell you the implementation team had a little bit of conversation about that, but then when they learned more about it and had the ability to provide comments, because again, two of the big concerns the implementation review team had was that you couldn't have an affordability mandate. And again, I mentioned Easton has selected to have, and it's an option. I mean, you don't have to have the 10%, but Easton wants that. And then they wanted to be able to preserve their commercial, existing commercial areas where they existed, but where it made sense for a district. So once we got over that, it was like, okay, we can control where these districts go, and we're going to move forward. You saw from the slide I put up there, that was just, that was not all the funding that the town has benefited from these programs. And not all, that doesn't even list all the programs that the state's talking about. I mean, they basically had, I think, the infrastructure program and the community, I'm going to get this right, wrong, the Housing Choice Community grants. But then by the time they came out with the revised guidelines, they had added more grant opportunities to that list. So that was a lot of money. I mean, the 1.5 million that the town received to construct the sewer in the Five Corners district really helped the town lower the betterment cost that was the highest of the three sewer districts at the time. The initial cost, it helped lower that to something significantly less than the initial estimates. So,
Of course, the state could lower taxes, and we wouldn't need to get our money back. We give them $1 and they give us back 20 cents, and we're supposed to be happy. Just saying.
It kind of sounds like a threat, doesn't it?
No, but I mean, realistically, it's we'll give you this money when we probably already had that money, and now they're just giving us our money back with a tax on it for extra
I kind
handling.
of agree with that.
Yeah. So
They're threatening to withhold funding.
right, which is already our money.
Non-compliance, which is already our money.
Correct. Yeah.
You did say that they were going to withhold funding,
you will become ineligible for that funding.
Yeah.
which means
If the town
withhold
doesn't
funding.
comply,
That's how they,
and it's not, I'm not talking about all
Well,
state
they're
aid.
still gonna take
It's
your money, you're just not gonna
particular
get it back.
grant programs.
Yeah.
And if you look at the ones that they've identified so far, they're ones that are really targeted towards economic development and growth.
Has reduction in building regulations been considered to make homes more affordable? Or are we going to, is the state going to continue to add oppressive regulation to make cost of housing very
I
high?
can't answer that
I
question.
know you can. It's just I'm making the statement publicly, that's all.
May I ask, just, because I'm a little slow to
I hate
this,
this
but
stuff.
is it,
Just
does
using
this
government
mean that
hammer.
in the event that there were, let's say, a multifamily,
I'm sorry, I can't hear Jean.
oh, no, I'm sorry, in the event that there were a multifamily development outside of these, is there any way that the town gets credit for other multifamily development unless, does it have to be within this identified area in order to qualify?
So this requirement is that the town have a zone that allows multifamily housing by right that is at least 50 acres in total, with 25 of those acres be contiguous acreage. So, and you can have, you can have sub-districts as small as 5 acres, but no smaller than that. So, yes, you could have located several. So,
But can you move them around after the fact? So let's say you have a development of 5 acres or more.
You know,
can you kind
that's
of
an interesting question. I haven't had anyone ask me that. And at the webinars I've been at and the conversations, people always have been more concerned that the state will come in and then ask for more and more and more. But
By withholding
I would
funding.
imagine that you could, just like any zoning, as long as it met the requirements, as long as you could demonstrate that it met the requirements.
Right, and I just wondered if
Yeah.
that would then.
Yeah, and I can post that. Let me write that down, because if I don't write it down, I'll think I'll remember it, but I won't. And I'll get back to my office and go, oh, I had a good question I need to follow up on. All right,
If
so.
I don't write stuff down, I will not remember it.
Trouble is, I lose the note.
Well, that's a different problem. I mean, the only other challenge with the increasing density, one, I think it's taken the power away from the individual municipalities to really plan their towns, and the state's coming in and say, no, we're going to tell you how to plan your town. And then increased density, maybe the towns had a plan, and like we don't have a lot of business in town, so most of the tax revenue gets pushed on to the homeowners, as we all saw our lovely quarterly tax mine went almost $1,000 a quarter. And so additional, we've made plans for our schools and invested exorbitantly in our schools, and increased density can easily make the amount of school space obsolete, where we just push through for the tax increase for increasing the size of services for police, fire, and municipal DPW, and that could easily be thrown out of whack where now we don't have enough police to serve the community. So, I mean, it's not just a matter of, and I'm just making a statement here, I'm not looking for an answer, but you know, increasing density comes with a lot of other considerations, and right now I just feel on a lot of these, like I've been following this very closely, and this was an excellent presentation, and thank you for taking the time to do it. I know the staff has put an awful lot of time into it. That there's a lot of other things that need to be considered that the state's just pushing forward and basically said, you're either going to do it or we're going to withhold your money. And I think that comes with its own challenges that, you know, the people of town will have the right to vote on. So if the town, if it goes, it has to go in front of the town for a vote to accept. So the
At town meeting.
at
yeah.
town meeting, and if the town meeting, the town people say no, what happens then?
Again, we'll try again in the fall.
Okay.
And then what happens?
If it's not adopted by the end of the
Okay,
year,
with the
the town
state.
becomes ineligible for the funding sources,
Mm-hmm.
and also will be out of compliance and subject to any other action that may occur, including lawsuits and potentially court-drawn districts.
Lawsuits by whom? By the Commonwealth against the town?
The Attorney General has basically said that towns that are subject to the requirement
Those will
need
be
to
interesting.
comply.
Those will be interesting
Is
lawsuits.
there gonna be an option on the warrant for the town to decide whether or not to not comply? Or is there just gonna be one single option, either a yes or no?
There'll be
To comply.
it will be the zoning, voting for the zoning.
So if you vote,
Wise to like put an option on there whether we wanna, challenge this?
No, I mean, my understanding is this is the plan we're proposing to be in compliance with what the Commonwealth is asking for. Do you, as a member, as an individual registered voter in town, do you agree, yes or no? And that's pretty much it. It's not multiple choice. It's just, yes, the town, you as a registered voter, vote yes that we're going to move forward with this, or no. And if it's no, the town has another shot, another bite at the apple, right, in the fall. And the same thing will happen. And those are happening.
Imagine the town could continue to try after
Right.
that. It's just that then you would be ineligible for the funding for a certain period of time, where
Correct.
right now,
Until you come in compliance.
one of the things, and I didn't get into that because it was kind of getting into the weeds, but when the state first issued the draft guidelines at that point in time, there were steps the town needed to take to be in temporary compliance or interim compliance. So one was submitting an action plan for how you were going to get to compliance. And I think there was another step. So, the town took those steps so that we could stay in compliance and apply. We applied for 4 grants last year, received all of those totaling, and they totaled $400,000. If we had not indicated compliance at that time, the town probably wouldn't have been eligible, and certainly not for this year's funding round, which starts now. You submit letters of interest for projects, and then in June you submit your final applications.
And if we don't vote yes, then they won't consider those applications.
Very
Well,
likely.
we have until the end,
Cut and dry.
the town has until the end of the year, so.
so by
Decent threat.
Yeah.
By presenting it the way you've described at the town meeting, if you're voting no, you're in effect saying that you don't want the town to comply with the state mandate.
Right,
Correct.
I mean,
Right.
because your question was, well, would there be a vote on whether to accept this or not? Kind of like what they're doing, I think, in Milton right now. but-
What I was saying, would there be an option whether or not, I understand there are some communities who are challenging this. I would imagine they're challenging this
well, I think the
through
only,
their representatives in the courts, in the legislature, in the State House. Would there be an option on the town to give to the town whether or not to join this opposition? In
But
these
there is individual,
challenges?
well, they're not class action against the
I don't
Commonwealth,
even
they're
know.
individual
You just kinda mentioned
municipalities.
there are some communities challenging this.
Right. And
Shouldn't the town
that's
have an option
that's
whether or not to join in those
Well-
communities or not?
again, I think those are up to individual municipalities. I don't see where we'd be joining with other towns, but I mean, listen, if an attorney thinks they can make money doing it, they'll figure out a way to do it, right?
In other words,
Same with a politician.
you're asking, should there be a mechanism by which the town of Easton can say, we want to throw in with these other towns that are
I was
challenging?
just wondering, because I just discovered, I actually looked online quite a bit, and I wasn't able to find anything. But the chair in his profession knows of some communities that are considering challenging
Right.
these, what we're calling mandates and requirements. And it just seems that you should give the town the opportunity to make that decision.
But they are. So there'd be a vote if the town doesn't approve it.
For another bite at the apple.
They come again-
If the
well,
town
they-
voted to
see-
challenge,
No, I understand that,
it
but
would be different.
no. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Thank you.
That the town can vote yes or no. If they vote no, Stephanie's team will sort of rework the plan as best they can, submit stuff to the state to see if it's compliance as they put it through their model to make sure it meets their guidelines. And if the town comes back and says no again, it's basically you're out of compliance, you haven't submitted by 12/31/2024, and you're ineligible to apply for funding for whatever programs, however they deem that out. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, it seems to me.
I mean,
Okay.
a court case would probably be something along the lines, and I'm just thinking about this right now,
That's all.
along the lines of, it's an unconstitutional taking or action by the legislature.
If there are communities that have already pre-planned their development.
Yeah, but
Right,
it's not a taking, because
so-
they're not taking.
No, but
So
I'm
we-
I'm just,
Yeah.
So hold on,
Yeah.
so
I'm throwing
we're
out
going
a,
way beyond the scope, so I'm going to start to reel it back in, and we can certainly
Thank
talk
you, Mr.
about
no,
this
Chair.
no,
post-meeting.
it's just in response to Ed's question.
Right, we can talk. We can
no.
talk about that post. You know, I don't want to keep Stephanie here all
Yeah.
night. She's been gracious enough
I-
to provide this presentation to us, and obviously the folks in town.
Very
The
informative.
the 5 or 6 people, including my mom, who watch this. So
You're lucky, nobody from my family
hey,
watches.
my mom watches everything. My
I-
number one fan.
I did have one question. I think you
I have a
answered this
couple of
already.
questions too.
But you said that there's no affordability mandate associated with this. But on the flip side, housing stock that's built under this program can count towards the affordability mandate, can it not?
So the state's not requiring that you have an affordability. What's being proposed by the planning board does have an affordability requirement. So if you're developing multifamily under this zoning, you have to provide 10% of the units
Which would
be
keep
affordable.
us in compliance with 40B.
Right. Well, it would contribute towards your SHI. Any units built, the affordable units would count towards your SHI.
Right, so in some sense, you get, assuming that you're fine with complying with everything the state wants you to do, you could get an added benefit from it.
Yes, yes. And the benefit's twofold. One, the town continues to add to its SHI to keep it. Right now, the town's, I think it's at 9.5. You're just under the 10%.
I thought we were over.
You were. And then there were
Things-
approved projects that haven't moved forward yet. And the Black Ledge project would have brought that back up to the 10%. And you would have been at 10% until the next census. So
Was that the project up off of
Union Street, yeah.
How many acres was that area?
5.7, I think. Someone asked me that.
9.7, so not.
No, I think it was
It
5.7.
wasn't that big.
I was curious if that was
Yeah.
an area that would be.
Okay, no, that's just,
Yeah. Yep. No, good questions.
Looking at the parcels depicted, most of them seem to be almost fully developed already with a use. I can't imagine the Target store being bulldozed and apartments being built there. I'm not sure we're gonna generate that many new units in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years with any of these parcels.
Yes,
Right.
Which
that
is
is,
a good, which is a good reason we can accept it and
Yes.
not
It-
change our position.
exactly. And in fact, one of the meetings I've done, or a couple, I've had people say, gee, we'd really like to see more undeveloped land or more land that is more attractive for redevelopment included, because we'd like to see some more housing. But yes, we think it's unlikely that a lot of these areas are going to be redeveloped in the immediate future, and even in, like 10 years out. I don't see that happening with Target or with the Hannaford, Big Y
Big Y,
Plaza.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, your question just suggested another question. Is there a good faith component to all of this? I mean, kind of building on what you just said, if the town designates an area where it's not possible in the short or immediate term to create the housing stock that the state obviously wants, would they give the thumbs down to?
No, the state has made it clear, and that's a good question. Because I think there are definitely communities. There are communities that basically have said, we're going to do this in our industrial area. And really for that reason, either it's very unlikely to get redeveloped, or we're just going to stick it over there. But the state has said, we're not telling you it has to be developed. We're telling you have to have a district that gives a developer or a property owner the choice of building multifamily housing on that property if that's what they want to do, if they feel it's economically viable for them to do. And I think I like the question about good faith effort. I think in looking at the districts, what Easton was looking for were areas that there was some potential, either for new development because it was an undeveloped area, or infill development, or some potential redevelopment, but not all at once. Not like all of a sudden this is going to happen overnight. And that was also kind of one of the thoughts in defining where the districts are. And again, it was important to the implementation review team to make sure that they were protecting their commercial the town's commercial areas as well. So, and again, that's why the state, I think they weren't trying to be overly heavy-handed, and the state allowed you to do it as an overlay district. It doesn't change. You folks know that if the zoning changes in an area, the existing uses have a benefit of legally non-conformancy until such time as the use is changed. So that use is not, while it may no longer be compliant, it's not disallowed, and all of a sudden someone has to change the use. It persists. And the state understood that and said, yeah, you can do this. You can retain the underlying zoning. You don't have to remove it. You can do this as an overlay district, or you can incorporate it into your existing zoning.
Stephanie, is it only applied to multifamily, or is mixed use also considered as part of this equation?
You cannot require mixed use, but you can allow it as long as the district can allow support the 15 units per acre. So again, really what they're talking about is a density bonus. So you have the minimum or the maximum. The way the zoning's written, it would on a lot, it would be 15 units maximum. If you were going to do mixed use on the first floor or in a separate building, then you could go up stories, and you could go up to, I thought it was 19 units per acre, but it might be it might be more than that. And so it's a density bonus.
And the only reason I asked is I've lived in California for about 5 years, and it was very common, a strip plaza, almost like Robert Drive, and then like another 2 or 3 stories of apartments
Yeah.
right above that.
Right.
And it's not
Right,
something we
and-
see
and
commonly
that's
around,
when-
at least down the suburbs.
Who asked I think you asked the question about what the folks
Right.
on Foundry Street were concerned with the Target in
Yeah, I
Hannaford,
think
and that's what they're
occurred.
concerned with, that it could develop up, because that is allowed in the zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Is there going to be a minimum of the lot size to take advantage of this? Like if somebody has a homeowner, it's good, a half an acre, can you put 8 units?
Well, it's got to be in they're saying an overlay district,
Yeah.
right? So they'd have
Right,
to
but
fall in that
there's
overlay.
all those different size lots.
What's
There
going
might
to
be some that's
dictate the
could be a-
size of the lot will primarily be the setbacks.
So conceivably, if I have half an acre and I'm in the overlay district, I could say
Yeah,
I
as
can-
long
I
as
would
you
like
met
to
the
redevelop and
setbacks,
have
yeah.
8 units on a half an
Yeah.
acre. That's going to be not popular, I don't think.
Well,
It is for the guys
you
who own
still
the
have to
property.
meet, the setbacks.
Yeah.
Well, you can go up, I
And-
mean, you can make it.
You know, no one's asked about that level of specificity in the zoning, so I think I don't have the
Well, I
slide.
see a lot of, my line of work, you see a lot of very creative use of small spaces.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
but you still have to meet the setback requirements. I think it's 20 feet from each property line minimum.
Can we require like at least a 1 acre size for someone to try to attempt this? Or does the state say it doesn't matter? If it's in the,
It's not that the state wasn't saying it had to be or
they just had to have
couldn't-
an
or
area
couldn't.
overlay of 25 contiguous
Right.
acres or a smaller sub-districts like she brought
Yeah.
up.
For a
But they
total
don't-
of 50.
Right, so.
Yeah, but then, and we can otherwise enforce the zoning requirements within those districts.
Right, but if it's by right, which is
Well,
going to be. and
but
if
the
I
by
have a
right
half
has,
acre
you have
parcel,
setback standards.
And let's say I have enough setback, but I can fit 8 units in a 3-story building, call that a triple decker.
So I don't know if you want me to continue, or I can send everyone to the website. So I had it up, it's,
I also said,
Yeah, that
oh,
was.
good,
I think
good.
that was in your
And
email.
if you go to the planning board page, it's right at the top, there's a link to the website, and there's a link to the zoning, the language with the setback requirements. I suggest you take a look at those. I could pull them up here, but then we'll be here for a bit
No, that's all
longer.
right, that's fine.
But it's a good question.
I just, could see that not being very,
And we anticipated that, so I think we feel like the setbacks are taking care of that.
Are we good?
I think I'm good.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie.
Coming out.
You're
Very, very
welcome.
good.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your questions and feedback.
Whether it's solicited or not. Hey, we've done all our work at this point. All that's left is, I don't have any pertinent items anticipated, so I'm satisfied. So if somebody wants to make a motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
fantastic. We'll do a hand vote. All those in favor? That's a 5-0. All set.
Thank you.
Thank you.